I'm Francis Sellers Collins. I was born April 14, 1950. I am a doctor geneticist from the United States. I didn't grow up in a religious home. My father was a classical musician and a playwright. My mother was a poet and a drama teacher. Our house was filled with music, books, ideas, and conversations about art, science, and philosophy. But not once did we talk about God. We didn't go to church. We didn't pray before meals. There wasn't even a Bible in our home. It wasn't that my parents were anti-religious. They just didn't think it mattered. And so, I grew up believing that life could be explained through reason and creativity, that morality was cultural, that death was natural, and that faith was unnecessary. By the time I reached college, I had embraced science with all my heart. Physics, chemistry, biology, and these were my tools. They gave me control, clarity, and power. If it couldn't be measured, tested, or proven, I dismissed it. God, to me, that was a myth for the weak, a comfort story for those afraid of the dark. Not that I hated religion, I simply didn't need it. I became an atheist, quietly, confidently, and intellectually. And it made me feel secure, like I had everything figured out. But that illusion wouldn't last. I went on to study medicine, not because I was trying to be spiritual, far from it. I wanted to understand the human body, to solve diseases, to fix what was broken. I believed that science could explain everything until I started spending time in hospital rooms. Not in lecture halls, not in research labs, but in quiet, sacred, aching places where people faced death. And that's where the cracks began to show. I still remember her, an elderly woman, fragile, dying. Her body was fading, but her eyes were steady. She spoke of heaven. She spoke of peace. She spoke of Jesus as if he were waiting just outside the door. And then one day, she looked at me and asked a simple question. "Dr. Collins, what do you believe?" I froze. It felt like time stopped. I had studied everything from molecular biology to quantum physics. And yet in that moment, I had no answer. Nothing. I mumbled something awkward and left the room. But I couldn't leave the question behind. What do you believe? Not as a doctor, not as a scientist, but as a human being. That question haunted me. I tried to push it away by diving deeper into science. More books, more data. But logic didn't silence the ache. And I began to realize I had built a life of knowledge without meaning. Science had given me explanations, but it hadn't given me peace. So I began to search, not because I suddenly wanted religion, but because I was no longer satisfied with the hollow answers I'd always accepted. I started reading philosophy. Arguments for God, arguments against God. Some were clever, some were frustrating, most left me empty. Then one day, a neighbor, a kind older Christian woman, said something that changed everything. "Why don't you read the Gospel of John?" she said. I scoffed at first. I was skeptical. But late one night, I opened the Bible, not to believe but to explore, and I was shocked. The Gospel of John didn't feel like myth. It didn't feel like religious propaganda. It felt like someone was speaking to me, not at me. It began not with a fairy tale, but with philosophy. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then this Word became flesh. Jesus, not an abstract idea, not a distant force. A person who wept, who loved, who spoke truth, and who walked toward the cross willingly. I couldn't stop reading. There was something in those pages that pierced through my pride. It wasn't doctrine, it wasn't dogma. It was love that made no sense. Love that demanded no perfection. Love that looked at me, a skeptical, analytical scientist, and whispered, "Come." At the same time, I discovered the writings of C.S. Lewis. He too had been an atheist, a rational, logical Oxford professor. And yet he came to believe in Christ not because of blind faith, but because of overwhelming truth. In his book, Mere Christianity, Lewis said, "I didn't go to religion to make me happy. I always knew a bottle of port would do that. If you want a religion to make you feel really comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity." That honesty floored me. He wasn't trying to sell me comfort. He was pointing to something real, something that explained the world better than anything else. Another quote hit me even harder. "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it, I see everything else." That was it. Christianity wasn't a crutch. It was a lens. And I realized I had spent my life denying something not because it was false, but because I didn't want it to be true. So one night, alone in my room, I prayed for the first time. I wasn't eloquent, I wasn't confident, but I was honest. God, if you are real, I want to know you. I need you. I'm done pretending I have all the answers. There was no thunder, no visions, no mystical experience, just silence and a strange, unexpected sense of peace. Something had shifted. I didn't become a Christian overnight, but the wall of pride had cracked, and through that crack, light began to enter. I kept reading, I kept praying, and slowly I began to see, not with my eyes but with my soul, that this faith I once mocked was the very thing my heart had been searching for. I realized something profound. Science explains how, but faith answers why. They are not enemies. They are not rivals. They are companions on the same journey. I continued my path in science, but everything had changed. Eventually, I was asked to lead the Human Genome Project, a historic international effort to map the entire genetic code of human life. We were unlocking the language of life itself. Billions of letters perfectly ordered. A code so complex it made computer software look like child's play. And the deeper we went, the more I felt awe. This wasn't just biology, this was poetry, precision, beauty. And I thought, this is not random. This is not accidental. This is a signature. That's why I call DNA the language of God, because no one writes code by accident. No one programs meaning into existence by chance. Behind every language, there is an author. And the more I studied the genome, the more I believed that author was not blind chance, but a loving creator. That moment of surrender in my room, the quiet prayer, the fragile peace, wasn't the end of my journey. It was only the beginning. Faith didn't erase my questions, it reframed them. It didn't silence my curiosity, it deepened it. I was still a scientist, still drawn to evidence, data, and discovery. But now I knew that truth wasn't limited to the material, that beyond what we could see, test, or measure, there was something, someone. And I had just met him. Leading the Human Genome Project was a turning point. We were mapping all 3.1 billion letters of the human DNA code. Letter by letter, base by base, we were reading the instructions for life. It was the most ambitious scientific effort in human history, a collaboration of nations, scientists, and technologies. And yet, in the midst of all the data, all the machinery and analysis and code, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just discovering how life worked. We were discovering why it was sacred. I remember staring at the sequence on a computer screen, billions of characters in precise order. A four-letter alphabet repeated again and again in ways more intricate than anything man had designed. And it hit me. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. At the most fundamental biological level, this wasn't chaos, this wasn't coincidence. This was poetry, a poem written in adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, a divine alphabet, a signature. So I called it what I believed it to be, the language of God. Not as a throwaway phrase, but as a scientist's reverent recognition. DNA is information, and information always comes from intelligence. In all of human experience, there is no known code without a coder, no message without a mind, no language without an author. And the genome, the complete instruction book of humanity, was, in my eyes, undeniable evidence of design. Not the design of a distant force, but of a personal creator. Not everyone agreed, of course. When I began to speak openly about my faith, some in the scientific world looked at me with suspicion. A few even accused me of betrayal, as if belief in God was incompatible with a scientific career. But I knew that wasn't true, because I hadn't walked away from science. I had walked deeper into it, with my eyes, my mind, and now my soul wide open. Strangely enough, I also found that some in the religious world distrusted science. They saw it as a threat, as if discovering how God created life could somehow replace God himself. But I don't see a contradiction. To me, science is a form of worship. It's the act of looking closely at what God has made and saying, wow, I didn't know it was that beautiful. The Bible says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Psalm 19:1. I believe the same is true for DNA. And for every cell in your body. Every time we peel back a layer of biology, we glimpse another fingerprint of the Creator. That doesn't mean we stop asking questions. It means we never stop being amazed. But more than scientific awe, what faith has given me is identity. You see, in all our genetic code, with all its complexity, power, and elegance, there is something it can't give you. Worth DNA tells you how your body is built. It doesn't tell you why your life matters. Only God can do that. And I've come to believe that our deepest identity is not in our blood, not in our IQ, not in our genetic uniqueness, but in this one simple truth. We are made in the image of God, and He loves us completely, eternally, enough to die for us. I once believed that death was the end, that life was a random event, that love was a biological illusion. But now, I believe in a love that is not random, a love that created the universe, a love that entered our world in human form, a love that faced death so we wouldn't have to fear it. People often ask me, how can someone like you, a scientist, a rational thinker, a doctor, believe in Jesus? And my answer is simple, because it's true. Not just emotionally, not just subjectively, but historically, philosophically, spiritually. I believe in Jesus because I've seen the brokenness of the world. I've seen the limitations of science, and I've seen the power of grace. I didn't come to faith easily. I didn't want to believe. I fought it for years, but truth has a way of breaking through, not with force, not with pressure, but with kindness, like a gentle knock at the door of the soul. And one day, I opened it. Now, I look back and I see God was never far. He was always close, even in the lab, even in the hospital room, even in the genome. He was there, waiting for me to stop building walls and start seeking truth. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever wondered whether faith and reason can coexist, whether a scientist can believe in miracles, whether there's more to life than what you can see, I want to say this plainly: yes. Faith is not the enemy of science. It is the fulfillment of it. And Jesus is not the enemy of logic. He is the Logos, the Word, the reason behind it all. Today I am still a scientist, still a doctor, still a man of evidence. But I am also a follower of Christ, not in spite of science, but because of it. Because the more I study creation, the more I see the face of the Creator. And the more I understand the human genome, the more I fall to my knees in awe. My name is Francis Collins. I once was an atheist. Now I am a believer, not because I stopped thinking, but because I finally started listening to reason, to beauty, to truth, and ultimately, to the voice of God. DNA was only the beginning. The cross was the destination, and grace was the revelation.